Kidd Creole committed horrible crimes that destroyed his legacy forever. But before we get into the shocking details of how this hip-hop legend ended up behind bars, let's talk about who he once was. Nathaniel Glover, known to the world as Kidd Creole, wasn't just another rapper. He was a founding member of Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, a group that literally built the foundation of hip-hop as we know it today. These pioneers created conscious rap with tracks like The Message and became the very first rap group ever inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame back in 2007. Born on February 19, in 1960 in the Bronx, Glover was there at the beginning, shaping a movement that would change music forever. But that's where the glory ends and the nightmare begins. By August 2017, the man who once stood alongside hip-hop royalty had fallen so far from grace that he was working as a security guard and handyman just to make ends meet. His music career had been dead since the late 1980s. On the evening of August 1st, 2017, Kidd Creole was walking to his job at a copy shop in Midtown Manhattan on East 43rd Street. He was carrying a steak knife on him. That night, he crossed paths with John Jolly, a 55-year-old homeless man, and what happened next would seal his fate forever. According to the evidence presented in court, Glover and Jolly began exchanging words as Glover walked past. But here's the thing that makes this so much worse. Glover didn't just keep walking. After he passed Jolly, he actually stopped, turned around, and walked back toward him. He approached Jolly, chest to chest, re-engaging a confrontation he could have easily avoided. Then Glover stabbed John Jolly twice in the torso with that steak knife. Minutes later, a group of tourists discovered Jolly bleeding in the street. He was rushed to the hospital, but died from his stab wounds. Now, here's where this story gets even more disturbing, and I want you to think about this. Drop a comment below telling me what you think justice should look like in cases like this. And while you're down there, hit that subscribe button because we cover stories that matter. Stories that show the real consequences of terrible choices. When police arrested Glover and interviewed him, he confessed to the attack in a videotaped statement. His excuse: he thought Jolly was gay and making a sexual advance toward him. Jolly had simply asked, "What's up?" And Glover took that as some kind of proposition. In his own words, Glover said this interaction made him a little annoyed and a little nervous. Prosecutors said Glover became enraged by what he perceived as a sexual proposition and that his actions were rooted in homophobia. But even Glover himself admitted the truth, saying, "It's all my fault because I chose to stab him. I have to take responsibility for that." But did he really take responsibility? Because what Kidd Creole did immediately after killing John Jolly shows a completely different picture. This wasn't some panicked reaction from a scared man. What happened next was calculated and cold. Glover fled the scene and ran 2 blocks to his workplace. Once he got there, he changed his clothes to hide any evidence. Then he took that murder weapon and cleaned it in an office sink. After spending about 15 minutes at work covering his tracks, Glover left, got on the subway, and rode all the way to the Bronx. There, he threw the knife into a sewer near a subway station. These weren't the actions of someone who acted in self-defense. This was someone who knew exactly what he had done and was doing everything possible to get away with it. The Manhattan District Attorney's Office documented every single one of these steps. The next day, NYPD officers recovered the knife and arrested Glover at his home in the Bronx. He was charged with second-degree murder on August 3rd, 2017. When this case finally went to trial in 2022, nearly 5 years after the killing, Glover's defense team tried 2 main strategies. First, they claimed self-defense, arguing that Glover felt threatened by Jolly and that Jolly's homelessness somehow made him more frightening. His lawyer actually tried to use the fact that the victim was homeless to justify why Glover felt scared. Second, the defense tried to argue that Jolly didn't die from the stab wound. They claimed alcohol and sedatives given to him at the hospital contributed to his death. But Manhattan State Supreme Court Justice Michelle Rodney wasn't having any of it. The judge made a crucial ruling based on New York Penal Law, Section 35 A-Fit-Mine, which governs when someone can use deadly force in self-defense. The law is very clear. You can only use deadly force when you reasonably believe the other person is using or about to use deadly force against you. Even then, you have a duty to retreat if you can do so safely. Justice Rodney determined that Glover's self-defense claim completely failed. Why? Because John Jolly was unarmed. He had no weapon. He posed no deadly threat. And most damning of all, Glover had every opportunity to just keep walking. He had already passed Jolly and was walking away, but instead he chose to turn around and confront Jolly chest to chest. The judge instructed the jury to disregard the self-defense claims entirely. Justice Rodney directly addressed the defense's disgusting attempt to use John Jolly's homelessness as some kind of excuse for his killing. The judge made it crystal clear that the law applies to everyone equally, stating that the killing was not somehow justified because the person is homeless. Then Justice Rodney delivered one of the most powerful statements of the entire case, saying simply, "A life is a life is a life." Those words carried enormous weight. They sent a message that the legal system would not allow anyone to use a victim's poverty or housing status to justify violence. Even at his sentencing, Glover showed he still didn't get it. He told the court he believed he should have been found not guilty and complained about being portrayed as someone who has no remorse or humanity. Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg Jr. emphasized that John Jolly's death was devastating to his family and made it clear that his office would hold people accountable for violent crimes. The reaction from the hip-hop community was one of shock and sadness. His brother Melle Mel had publicly expressed confidence before the sentencing that Glover would successfully challenge the case. When that 16-year sentence came down, it marked a tragic end to a story that started with so much promise. This case also shines a harsh light on the financial struggles faced by early hip-hop pioneers. Glover went from performing for thousands to working odd jobs just to survive. But that doesn't excuse what he did. His conviction for a fatal stabbing that appeared to be motivated by homophobia and directed at a marginalized, homeless man now stands as a permanent cautionary mark on his legacy. Nathaniel Glover is currently 65 years old and began serving his sentence in May 2022. He'll be behind bars until 2038 if he serves his full term. Before we wrap this up, what do you think Kidd Creole's legacy should be now? Should we remember him for his contributions to hip-hop or for the crime that ended John Jolly's life? Drop your thoughts in the comments. At the end of the day, this case is about accountability. Nathaniel Glover made a choice on August 1st, 2017. He chose to turn around. He chose to confront John Jolly. He chose to stab him twice. And then he chose to run, hide the evidence, and try to get away with it. Every single one of those choices led him to where he is today, sitting in a prison cell with 16 years ahead of him. Justice was served in this case. An innocent man lost his life, and the person responsible was held accountable. The court refused to let John Jolly's homelessness become a reason to minimize his death or excuse his killer, and ultimately, even someone of historic stature in hip-hop culture faced the full weight of the law for choosing violence over simply walking away. This case will remain a fixture in both legal and cultural discussions for years to come. It shows the severe consequences that follow when someone chooses violence instead of de-escalation. Kidd Creole's story is a tragedy on multiple levels, but through all that tragedy, the justice system worked. It held someone accountable. It affirmed that every life has equal value, and it sent a clear message that no amount of past achievement can erase present crimes. That's the legacy of this case. And that's the note we end on. Justice served.